Hello friends, this is True Story. Watch till end. My name is Ray Caldwell, and the night my dignity was laughed at, I learned something dangerous about silence. It doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it means you're still deciding how much truth the room deserves. The laughter didn't stop because I raised my voice. It stopped because I didn't. But that came later. Before the silence swallowed everything, there was a Christmas table, a blinking string of lights, and a joke that cut deeper than anyone noticed, except me. It was the kind of December evening Iowa does best. Snow falling slow and thick, like the sky was trying to soften the town. Cedar Falls looked calm from the outside, porches dusted white, streetlights glowing like they were holding their breath. Inside our house, warmth pressed against the windows, cinnamon candles burning too strong, and a turkey that had gone a little too far in the oven. Same as every year. Linda said it made the house feel festive. I said nothing. I rarely did. The dining room was full. Linda's family filled the chairs with coats draped over the backs, voices overlapping, plates clinking. Her sister Pam sat straight-backed with that tight smile she wore when she was already judging the room. Her husband leaned back like he didn't want to be involved in anything that might turn uncomfortable. Cousins I'd known for decades talked too loud, laughed too quick. And then there was Tyler, 28 years old, sharp haircut, quarter-zip sweater that still smelled like a catalog page. He sat down like the table should be grateful he showed up, scanning the room with quick eyes. Already bored. He didn't grow up with money, but he wore confidence like it had been handed to him at birth. He glanced around, wrinkled his nose, and said it. "What's that smell?" Pam giggled too fast. "Oh my God, Tyler." He pointed his fork at me like it was part of the joke. "Ray, you come straight from the garage or what?" I showered, I said. Calm. Neutral. "It's the turkey and candles," I added. He leaned back in his chair, eyes bright, enjoying himself. "Nah, it's you. Like VFW and Old Man Cologne." He smiled. Kinda stinky. For a second, there was only the wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. Then one cousin snorted. Pam covered her mouth like she couldn't help it. Laughter rolled across the table. Warm, easy, careless. The kind that tells you everyone's relieved it's not them. Linda didn't look at Tyler. She looked at me. Her eyes said, "Don't. Not tonight." "Tyler," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's Christmas." He grinned wider. "Oh, relax. We're family." Then louder for the room. Some of us had to work our way up without smelling like a shop rag. Pam's husband chuckled. "He's just messing with you, Ray." I stared at my plate. The gravy was already forming a skin, cooling faster than it should have. I thought about the VFW fish fry off University Avenue, the burnt coffee, the bent-backed men who didn't laugh at you for being who you were. Men who knew what quiet respect felt like. Linda cleared her throat. "Tyler, be nice." It came out soft, like a suggestion she didn't expect to be followed. Pam tilted her head. "You know, Tyler really is doing well. Corporate and all that." Linda jumped on it, eager. "He is. He's making something of himself. Something like I was nothing." The fork flexed in my hand. Anger rose slow and thick, like used motor oil in winter. I swallowed it. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "Ray," Linda snapped suddenly sharp. "Stop." I blinked. I hadn't even spoken. "Stop making the family look bad." Tyler smirked. "See? Even Mom agrees." He called her Mom like it was a title he'd earned. I'd met him when he was 9. His real father had vanished years earlier, somewhere outside Des Moines, never bothered to come back. I taught Tyler how to change a tire in a Hy-Vee parking lot when his first beater went flat. I sat through his award nights, clapped loud, even when he wouldn't meet my eyes. I covered a semester of community college when his loans fell through. None of that mattered when he wanted to feel big. Tyler wiped his mouth and shifted gears like the insult had just been an appetizer. "Anyway," he said, "big year for me. Promotions basically locked." Pam leaned in. "Oh, where are you at now?" His whole face lit up. "Compliance side. Corporate safety. Real oversight. I sign off on high-level filings for the regional guys. We're headquartered out of Delaware, but my division runs Iowa and Minnesota farm contracts. Transport. All that. Big money." Linda's face softened. She touched his arm. Honey, that's wonderful. Tyler looked straight at me. See, Ray? This is what working looks like. Nobody else heard the way I did. Not because they were stupid, because they didn't know what those words meant. But I did. The way he described signing off didn't match how that world actually worked. The title he used wasn't one you threw around casually, unless you were trying to impress people who wouldn't check. And Delaware wasn't a flex. It was a clue. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I didn't scramble. I just nodded, like an old man trying to keep up. Tyler laughed and lifted his glass. Don't worry. Next year I'll get Ray a cologne set. Something to cover up that stinky. The table laughed again, relieved I stayed small. I raised my iced tea. Linda didn't allow alcohol at Christmas. Said it made people messy. I took a slow sip, ice hitting my teeth. Inside my chest, something settled. Cold. Clear. Quiet as fresh snow. Because Tyler had just handed me his job like a business card. And the details were wrong. After everyone left, the snow kept falling, thick and silent. Linda stood at the sink rinsing plates that were already clean. She did that when she was upset. Kept her hands busy, so she didn't have to look at me. Well, she said finally, without turning. Okay. I hung my coat on the chair. My gloves were damp. If you say so. She stiffened. Don't start. I didn't. She turned, eyes sharp. Ray, you embarrassed me tonight. I laughed once, short and surprised. I sat there and didn't say a word. You didn't have to, she said. Your face said plenty. He called me stinky. She waved it off. He was joking. Didn't feel like it. She sighed, tired. You're too sensitive. He's doing well. He's proud. You should be happy for him. Happy. I watched snow pile up on the porch rail. I am. I'm glad when anyone works hard. Then act like it, she snapped. Stop making the family look bad. She went upstairs without waiting for an answer. The bedroom door closed softly, like she didn't want to wake something. I stayed in the living room. The clock ticked. The furnace kicked on. Christmas lights blinked red, green, red, green. I wasn't angry the way I used to be when I was younger. This was different. This was pressure. Wait. I'd spent decades noticing small things because small things kept people alive. Mislabeled loads. Missing signatures. Timelines that didn't add up. You learn to trust patterns when you've seen enough wrecks to know how lies end. Tyler's story had holes. I didn't want to prove him wrong. I wanted to be wrong. But sleep didn't come. Near midnight, I grabbed my coat and drove to Casey's on University. The parking lot half buried, lights buzzing over the pumps. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and fried food that never leaves the air. The girl at the counter nodded. Cold one. Gets in your bones, I said. Back home, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. Told myself 10 minutes. Just enough to quiet the itch. I typed the company name Tyler had dropped so casually. And the room grew very still. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't anger. It's certainty forming quietly in the dark. And once that happens, there's no going back. I stared at the screen and thought, how much truth does this family really want? And what will it cost me to give it to them? I stared at the screen longer than I should have, not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because I did. The house was quiet in that late-night way, where even the walls seemed to listen. Snow brushed against the windows in soft taps, the kind of sound that usually calms you. That night it didn't. The glow from the laptop cut across the kitchen table, pale and unforgiving. 10 minutes, I told myself. Just enough to prove I was tired and imagining things. I was already past that. The company website loaded slow, my internet struggling under the weather. A glossy page bloomed onto the screen. Smiling stock photos. Words like innovation and integrity stacked neatly like they'd been polished by a committee. I clicked through the menus the way muscle memory takes over when you've done this kind of work your whole life. Careers. Leadership. Compliance. Names appeared. Titles. Photos. Not his. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes, pressing my fingers into the bridge of my nose until the pressure burned. It meant nothing yet. Websites lag behind real life all the time. I'd seen it before. Promotions announced internally before the public caught up. That didn't mean Tyler was lying. I told myself that twice. Then I opened LinkedIn. Tyler's profile was public, of course. New headshot, Confident smile, chin angled just enough to say trust me. His title was right there in bold letters. The same one he'd brag about at the table. The same one that had made something in my chest go cold. I scrolled slowly. Endorsements from people I didn't recognize. Buzzwords piled on top of each other, like kindling waiting for a spark. Dates that almost lined up, but not quite. Close enough for someone who wanted to believe. Wrong enough for someone who'd spent decades looking for cracks. Maybe he'd just started. Maybe the site hadn't updated. Maybe I was tired. I opened a new tab and searched the company name with the word audit. The article came up third. Local Iowa paper. 3 years old. I recognized the reporter's name. She was careful, the kind who didn't publish unless she could stand behind it. Quiet federal compliance review. Transportation contracts. Documentation issues. Nothing criminal. Not yet. My stomach tightened. I read it once. Then again. Slower the second time. Tyler's voice echoed in my head. I sign off. The way he'd lean back when he said Delaware. The confidence. The ease. I closed the laptop. Knowing more meant doing something with it. And I wasn't ready for that. The next day passed like I was underwater. Sounds muffled. Time stretched thin. Linda moved around the house polite and distant, like we were co-workers sharing space instead of a couple who'd built a life together. We ate dinner without talking much. Snow stopped falling. Plows scraped the streets clean, leaving that gray slush Iowa winters are famous for. On Tuesday, my daughter Megan called from Waterloo. "Dad," she said carefully, the way she did when she already knew the answer to what she was asking. "Mom says things are tense." "Your mom always says that," I replied, staring at the wall. She hesitated. "She says you're digging into Tyler's work." I closed my eyes. "She said that. She said you're being suspicious." Suspicion was easier than apology. Easier than admitting she'd watched her husband be humiliated and done nothing. "Megan," I said, choosing my words the way I always had. "Have you ever heard someone talk about a job and thought, that doesn't sound right?" She was quiet for a second. "Yes, that's all this is. Just be careful," she said softly. "I don't want you hurt." Neither did I. Friday night, I went to the VFW fish fry. The place smelled like grease, beer, and old wood soaked with stories. Men my age sat with their backs bent, voices low, eyes tired but honest. Nobody laughed at me there. Nobody needed to. I told my friend Carl, retired from the credit union, about a kid bragging about a job that didn't add up. I didn't say Tyler's name. I didn't need to. Carl frowned. "Happens more than you think," he said. "Kids inflate. Parents want to believe." "What do you do?" I asked. He shrugged. "You wait. Or you check the paper." That night, an email landed in my inbox. No name. No greeting. Just a subject line that tightened my chest. It mentioned a review. A date. A division Tyler had bragged about running. I stared at the screen until the coffee beside me went cold. Now it wasn't just a hunch. It was a clock. And once you hear a clock, you can't unhear it. I didn't open the email again. Didn't forward it. Didn't print it. I let it sit there like a weight in my pocket, reminding me where gravity lived. By morning, I made myself a rule. I wouldn't touch anything that wasn't already public. No favors. No shortcuts. No crossing lines. I'd spent too many years telling drivers and managers that rules mattered to start breaking them now. After breakfast, toast, black coffee, the radio mumbling farm prices, I opened the laptop again. I started where lies usually crack. Timelines. Tyler's LinkedIn said he'd been promoted last spring. The company's public filing said the compliance reorganization didn't happen until late summer. I pulled up the Iowa Secretary of State site and searched the company's registered agents. Same name as the article. Same division. Same slow trail of breadcrumbs. I took notes the way I always had. Dates on the left. Claims on the right. No drama. Just columns. By noon, the pattern was clear. Tyler hadn't invented a job out of thin air. He'd done something smarter and more dangerous. He'd borrowed language from job postings, stitched it together like a quilt. Close enough to sound impressive. Wrong enough to fall apart if anyone tugged a single thread. What bothered me wasn't the bragging. It was the confidence. The way he'd used his mother's pride like cover. On my lunch break, I drove to the credit union. The parking lot was slushy. The doors whooshed open with warm air that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old paper. Carl looked up from his desk, glasses low on his nose. "Didn't think I'd see you twice in a week." "I'm not here to ask for anything," I said. He smiled. "That's good, because I wouldn't give it." I laughed once, then slid my notebook across the desk, careful to keep names out of it. "I just want to know if something I'm seeing makes sense." He read slow, thorough. When he finished, he leaned back. "That title," he said. "Yeah, that's not how it works. So I'm not crazy." "No," he said. "You're just old enough to know better." On the way out, I stopped by the bulletin board near the lobby. Community notices. Meetings. A flyer for a county ethics seminar. The date matched the email. That night at dinner, Linda watched me like I might confess to a crime. "You've been quiet," she said. "I'm usually quiet." "Tyler's having a rough patch," she said quickly. "You don't need to pile on." "I'm not piling on," I replied. "I'm staying out of it." She didn't believe me. I could see it in the set of her jaw. Saturday morning, I ran into Pam at Hy-Vee near the dairy case. The bakery smelled like sugar and bread. "Tyler's doing so well," she said out of nowhere. "Linda must be proud." "She is," I said. Pam leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He mentioned maybe needing some help with an investment. Family only." There it was. I finished shopping and sat in my truck for a long minute. Engine off, breath fogging the windshield. The anger came back then, not hot, steady. At the VFW that evening, I listened more than I talked. Old men telling old stories. One mentioned a kid who'd lost everything because he believed his own press. When I got home, there was another email. Public list. Agenda. Names. Dates. Tyler's name wasn't there, but the division was. And the meeting was scheduled for the following week. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. If Tyler kept talking, he wasn't just going to embarrass himself. He was going to take his mother down with him. Waiting is heavier than acting. It presses on your chest, makes every small sound feel like an accusation. The weeks stretched the way Iowa winters do. Slow, gray, stubborn. Snow melted into slush during the day and froze again at night. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, said very little. Silence became my routine. Not the peaceful kind, the careful kind. Linda noticed. Tuesday evening, she stood in the doorway while I sat at the kitchen table. Papers neatly stacked. Laptop closed. "Old habits." "What's all this?" she asked. "Nothing important. You've been different since Christmas. You told me to stop making the family look bad." I said. "I took that seriously. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She hesitated. "Tyler's trying. He's building something. I don't want you tearing him down just because you feel left behind." Left behind? The words landed harder than she meant them to. "I'm not tearing anyone down," I said quietly. "I'm standing still. You're hiding something." That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay there listening to the furnace kick on and off, thinking about Megan's voice telling me to be careful, about Tyler's grin, about how easy it would be to delete everything and go back to being the quiet one. On Thursday, Megan came by with a pie from Hy-Vee, still warm, set on the counter like a peace offering. "Dad," she said softly, "Mom's scared." "Of what?" "That you're about to do something you can't take back." "So am I," I said. She hugged me tight before she left, like she was anchoring herself. Friday night, I went back to the VFW. Carl sat with me and didn't ask questions. "You know," he said eventually, "sometimes doing nothing is a decision. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a coat." When I got home, Linda was waiting in the living room. No TV, just a lamp. "Pam called," she said. "Tyler's asking everyone to come to a New Year's gathering. Wants to announce something." "What kind of something?" She looked away. "An opportunity." She folded her hands. "Ray, please. If you have concerns, keep them to yourself. Just this once." The weight of it settled then. The marriage. The years. The cost of speaking. I opened my laptop. One click would erase everything. My phone buzzed. Another email. Public. Plain. Final agenda. Same hall. Same building. Same afternoon. I closed the laptop and walked back into the living room. "I'm not hiding anything," I said. "But I'm not lying for anyone either." She swallowed. "So what are you going to do?" I thought about dignity. I'm going to listen, I said, and I'm going to let people finish what they start. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The clock was done whispering. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, the waiting had done its damage. Waiting changes you. It sharpens your hearing, stretches your patience thin, makes every small sound feel louder than it should. By then, I wasn't angry. Anger burns out. What I felt was heavier, like standing on ice won't hold, listening to it crack one slow line at a time. The community hall sat just off the main road, a square brick building that had hosted everything from wedding receptions to blood drives. I'd been there more times than I could count. That night, it looked different. The parking lot was packed tighter than usual, cars angled where they shouldn't be, exhaust hanging in the cold air like breath held too long. Inside, the smell hit first. Coffee. Winter coats damp with melted snow. Sugar from store-bought cookies laid out on folding tables. Someone had brought a cooler of soda, and cheap champagne they weren't allowed to open yet. White string lights hung along the walls, blinking softly, trying to make optimism feel permanent. Folding chairs faced a small podium near the front. Tyler Brennan stood beside it like it belonged to him. Tailored navy blazer. No tie. Sleeves pushed up just enough to look effortless. That watch on his wrist caught the light every time he moved. Too shiny, too loud. He laughed easily, clapping backs, shaking hands, playing the room the way some men do when they think they already own it. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the door, counting. Linda walked beside me, her arms stiff through mine. "Please," she whispered, "just don't do anything." "I won't," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't there to do anything. I was there to let something happen. Pam waved us over, excitement written all over her face. "Isn't this great?" she said. "Tyler's really stepping up." We took seats halfway back. Megan slipped into the chair beside me and squeezed my hand onto the armrest. Her palm was warm. "Steady." Tyler cleared his throat at the podium. The room settled the way rooms do when they expect to be impressed. "Thank you, everyone," he began. "I won't take too much of your time." He talked about growth, opportunity, how the region was changing, and how smart people got in early. He stacked words carefully: compliance, oversight, federal alignment. Each one placed where it sounded right. Heads nodded. Pam beamed. A few people leaned forward like they didn't want to miss a thing. Linda's shoulders relaxed. This was the part she'd been waiting for. Then Tyler smiled wider. "Some people don't understand how the modern world works," he said, his eyes flicking toward me for half a second. "But that's okay. That's why leaders step up." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Linda's fingers dug into my arm. Tyler pressed on, numbers rounded too neatly, timelines too vague. And then he said it again, the thing he couldn't stop saying. The title, the authority, the power to approve. I raised my hand. The room paused. Tyler blinked, surprised, then smiled the way you smile at someone you think you're about to educate. "Yes," he said. "Ray, right. I'm not great with corporate stuff," I said, standing slowly. My voice didn't shake. That surprised even me. "Can you help me understand something?" A few people smiled indulgently. Tyler relaxed. This was familiar ground for him, explaining things to people he believed were beneath him. "Sure," he said. "What's up?" "You said you sign off on regional compliance filings," I said. "Is that before or after the internal audit?" He laughed. "Depends on the quarter." "That's interesting," I said, "because the internal audit comes after sign-off in your division, right?" He waved a hand. "Details." I nodded. "And your division's headquartered in Delaware." "Correct. So your senior staff list will be public," I said, "because of the federal review." The room grew quieter. Someone coughed. Tyler's smile tightened. "I don't see what this has to do with." "I'm almost done," I said gently. I took out my phone. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. "Public records," I said. "Anyone here could check." I read the line aloud. Date, division, senior staff names. Tyler's isn't there. "That's not updated," he snapped. "I thought that too," I said. So I checked the final agenda. I scrolled. This one's dated last week. Linda stood halfway out her chair. "Ray," I kept my eyes on Tyler. "And the title you mentioned," I said. It doesn't exist. Not in your company. Not in Iowa. Not anywhere. The heater clicked. Pam's face drained of color. Tyler opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, I said. I did this work for 20 years. I know how titles work. I know how audits work. And I know when someone's using words to hide facts. A man in the front row spoke quietly. Is there an investigation? I looked at Tyler. You want to answer that? He didn't. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I said to the room. But if money's being asked for tonight, you deserve the truth. Tyler grabbed the podium like it might steady him. This is a misunderstanding. No, I said. It's a lie that got too big. For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone stood up and walked out. Then another. Chairs scraped. Coats rustled. Voices dropped to whispers, then rose just enough to carry confusion, anger, disbelief. People avoided Tyler's eyes as they passed him, like proximity itself was dangerous. Pam whispered his name once, sharp, frightened, but he didn't answer. He stood there near the podium, unplugged, eyes darting, trapped inside the space he'd built for himself. Linda didn't move at first. She stared at the floor, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. Megan touched her shoulder. Mom. Linda looked at me instead. For a long second, neither of us spoke. Christmas dinners. Quiet compromises. Words swallowed to keep the peace. Then she stood slowly, like her legs weren't sure they remembered how. We need to go, she said. Outside, the night air was bitter and clean. Snow drifted down under the streetlights, light this time, like the town was exhaling. Tyler pushed past us, phone to his ear, voice low and frantic. He didn't look back. The drive home felt longer than usual. Linda stared out the window. I kept my hand steady on the wheel, watching the road. At home, she set her coat on the chair and sat at the kitchen table, covering her face with her hands. I didn't know, she said. I swear, Ray. I didn't know. I know, I said. She looked up, eyes red. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought about the times I tried to speak, the times I've been told to stop, to keep the family looking good. You asked me to keep quiet, I said. I tried. Her shoulders shook. I chose the wrong thing. We didn't fix everything that night. Truth doesn't do that. It rearranges the furniture whether you like it or not. Tyler didn't come by for weeks. When he did, he looked smaller, quieter. He didn't apologize. Not really. But he didn't brag again either. The watch disappeared. The investment talk vanished. One Friday morning, I stopped by the VFW for coffee. Carl nodded when I walked in. Everything settled down? He asked. Mostly, I said. Truth tends to do that. Outside, snow fell steady and soft, covering the streets without asking permission. I thought about dignity, about how it isn't loud, about how sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is wait, watch, and speak only when the facts are ready to speak with him. Silence can be strength, but truth is what gives it meaning. The house felt different after that night. Not quieter, just honest in a way it hadn't been for a long time. Snow kept falling over Cedar Falls the same way it always did, steady and indifferent, covering streets, porches, mistakes. Life didn't pause just because a lie collapsed in public. The furnace still kicked on. The coffee still brewed too strong in the mornings. Cars still slid a little at stop signs. But inside our walls, something had shifted its weight. Linda didn't speak much the first few days. Neither did I. We moved around each other carefully, like two people learning the shape of a room after the furniture's been rearranged in the dark. There were no dramatic arguments, no speeches, just space, and the understanding that something fragile had finally cracked instead of bending again. On the second morning after New Year's, I found Linda sitting at the kitchen table before dawn. No makeup, no robe, just her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. I keep replaying it, she said without looking up. Every dinner, every time I defended him. I sat across from her. The chair creaked the same way it always had. You wanted to believe, I said. That doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. But it explains it. She nodded slowly. I told you to stay quiet, she said. I told you to make us look good. I didn't answer right away. Outside, a plow scraped the street, metal on ice. I did stay quiet, I said finally. longer than I should have. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Linda never cried easily. I forgot who you were, she said. Or maybe I stopped paying attention. That hurt more than the insult ever had. But it was an honest hurt, and honesty, even painful honesty, felt cleaner than the silence we'd lived with. Tyler didn't call. Not that week. Not the next. Pam called once, voice tight, asking if I'd meant for things to go that far. I told her no. The truth had gone there on its own. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue with. Weeks passed. Winter settled in deeper, turning everything gray and stubborn. Linda and I found a new rhythm. Not perfect, not polished, but real. We talked more. Sometimes about Tyler. Sometimes about nothing important at all. The space between us didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like room to breathe. When Tyler finally showed up, it was on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced. I heard his car before I saw him. Same engine. Different weight to the sound. When he stepped inside, he didn't wear the blazer. No watch. Just a plain jacket and hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who'd been walking on stilts and finally had to come back down to the ground. Linda froze in the kitchen doorway. Tyler. Hi, Mom. He nodded at me. Ray. We stood there a moment, all of us unsure who was supposed to speak first. I'm not here to argue, he said quickly. Or ask for anything. That's good, I said. He swallowed. I shouldn't have talked like that. Ever. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it wasn't nothing either. I got carried away, he added. I thought if I said it enough, it would become real. Linda closed her eyes. I studied him. The boy I'd taught to change a tire. The man who tried to build himself out of borrowed words. You don't need to be bigger than you are, I said. But you do need to be honest about where you stand. He nodded once. I know. We didn't hug. We didn't fix things in that moment. But he left quieter than he'd arrived. And that mattered. After that, life continued the way life always does, slowly, imperfectly forward. Tyler stayed distant. The family gatherings grew smaller, calmer. No one bragged anymore. No one laughed at anyone else's expense. One Friday morning, I went back to the VFW for coffee. Same smell. Same dim warmth. Carl was there, stirring sugar into a mug like he had nowhere else to be. Looks like winter's not letting go, he said. Neither do habits, I replied. He smiled. You did the right thing. I waited too long, I said. Maybe, he shrugged. But you waited until the truth was ready to walk on its own. That stuck with me. Because that was the part nobody talked about. The waiting. The restraint. The discipline it took not to explode, not to humiliate, not to turn pain into spectacle. People think justice has to be loud. That dignity requires dominance. But I'd learned something different. Dignity is quiet. Truth doesn't rush. And silence, real silence, isn't weakness. It's preparation. One evening, Linda and I sat on the couch watching the snow fall outside the window. Christmas lights were gone. The house smelled like nothing at all. I'm proud of you, she said suddenly. For what? For not becoming what they expected. I nodded. That was the hardest part. The world didn't reward me with applause. There was no public apology, no dramatic redemption arc. Just a quieter house, a steadier marriage, and the knowledge that I hadn't betrayed myself to keep others comfortable. Snow fell again that night, covering the street the same way it always did, without asking permission. And I realized something important. Truth doesn't humiliate people. Lies do eventually. If you've ever been laughed at, talked over, or told to stay quiet for the sake of peace, remember this. Silence can be strength, but only when it's backed by truth. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world where dignity feels expensive, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about patience, restraint, and quiet justice, make sure you stay connected. Some truths take time, but they always arrive.